Soon may the wellerman come, bring us coffee, tea, and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, take our leave and go. At a fairness on the town, her hair was blonde and her dress was brown. Soon may the wellerman come around.
It's October of 2023, and Kentucky Lake is being drawn down to winter pool, leaving my O'Day Ospray Bridget floating in only a few inches of water. I was fortunate enough to be able to keep her in the water at this dock all summer, and that allowed me to do a lot more sailing than I would have if I was trailering. With the season concluding, it's time to haul out, and Bridget is completely engineless, so hauling out will mean sailing her to a nearby boat ramp. But I figured if I'm going to be setting sail anyways, might as well take the opportunity to go on one last overnight voyage together. The target destination will be the Blood River, over 20 miles south of the dock, and the Blood River seems an appropriate destination for October. I'm passing Goose Island for the last time this year, and wouldn't you know it, a flock of geese is flying over and being fairly vocal. That must be a good omen for sure. My course will primarily follow the marked creek channels on the western side of the lake. The eastern side of the lake is the larger and much deeper Tennessee River channel. This is also the primary shipping lane that allows barges to pass through the lock at Kentucky Dam. I tend not to hang out in the Tennessee River channel for any great amount of time in my engineless boats. I think it's pretty clear who would win a game of chicken between a fiberglass dinghy and a river barge. Light winds at the moment out of the northwest. We're sailing wing and wing, and I just passed a bright yellow trimaran. Practically speaking, it probably isn't worth the effort, but I just can't bring myself to sail past a beautiful place like Willow Island. I'm greeted by a small band of pelicans standing watch on the point of the island. As usual, they don't seem bothered by me or my boat. During the height of summer, the vast majority of this island is inundated, with only the extreme north and south ends having any exposed dry land whatsoever. Well, I've just landed on Willow Island, and I drug the rudder for about a good 75 feet or so. It was a little bit flatter and shallower than I expected. The last time I was here was in my kayak, and that was at Summer Pool, and there was barely any dry land on this island. The north end of the island where I'm at right now is all sand and a lot of willow trees. With the lake level this low, the place is inviting, and I could almost conceive of setting up camp here, but we've only covered a few miles, and I need to keep the boat moving south to Blood River. I'm just passing Willow Island, and I'm inside of the 6880 bridge. Wind is picking up and it's beginning to get a little bit choppy. I'm closing in fast on the bridge, and I'm just a little bit nervous as I've never sailed under the bridge before. I decide to douse the jib in order to make a slow and controlled approach. There's a barge crossing just ahead of me in the opposite direction, over in the main Tennessee riverbed. It's a little bit rough and rolly. Even though I know this is a very tall bridge, I can't help but be a little bit apprehensive about whether the mast will actually clear. As I pass safely under the bridge, this windsurfer appears unexpectedly. Never had a boat in the water south of the 6880 bridge. I pick up the Mark Creek channel again and continue my southerly run. I'm beginning to think I may not reach the Blood River on this day, so I need to start thinking about a campsite on the western shore of Kentucky Lake. And I know there are some patches of TVA land down here, but most of what I'm seeing is developed. Technically, the entire shoreline up to a certain height is managed by TVA and freely accessible by the public, but I'm going to need a protected creek or cove to beach the boat overnight. The creek channel is very tight down here south of the bridge, Sometimes the buoys are as close together as maybe 30 feet, I'd say. Having consulted the chart, I finally realized that finding a suitable camp on the western shore in this area is going to be difficult, so I make the decision to cross over to the eastern shore of LBL. LBL is land between the lakes, a large tract of wooded public land lying between Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake. With numerous creeks and coves in LBL, I know I won't have any problem finding a suitable camp. With evening near, a blanket of gray clouds moves in suddenly, along with a screaming north wind. Sailing along the LBL shoreline for a while, eventually I located an isolated cove that seemed protected enough, and I figured it would do for the night. This cove turned out to be beautiful and secluded, but unfortunately the bank was made up of large, hard-edged rocks, not fine gravel, sand, or mud, so really the worst possible substrate to beach a fiberglass boat. But the sun was going down, and all I could really do was pull the bow up on a log and make off the bow painter with some good tension on it to hold it there. I set up my Eureka Spitfire one-man tent there on the bank just on the rocks, and of course you can't drive tent pegs into gravel or rocks, so what I do in that instance is just have a line from the front and the back and tie it to a tree, or if there are no trees available, just get a heavy piece of driftwood or a rock and tie it off to that. Lows were predicted in the 60s that night, so a fire was not really needed for warmth, though it is nice to have some light. And I would of course be rekindling it in the morning in order to make my cowboy coffee. With camp broken down and loaded up, it was time to get underway once again, and the first task would be crossing the lake back to the western shore of Kentucky Lake. As I went to raise the main, I noticed that I had broken a batten. It must have happened during the gale last evening as I was coming into camp. There was a very strong puff of wind just as I was coming into the cove. The water was flat in my protected cove, but I could see a good swell running out on the main lake, so just to be safe, I set only the main to make the crossing until I was sure of the conditions. Back on the western shore of the lake, we once again picked up the creek channel and continued heading south for the Blood River. The creek channel here was very narrow, with the buoys being only 30 feet apart in some places. The north end of this lake is really very deep, and according to most people and most charts, you don't really have to worry about running aground even at winter pool. But once you get south of Barge Island, you start to see some flats and shoals and shallow areas, and also buildings that were underwater, because this is a man-made lake. It's essentially just the flooded Tennessee River. Now that I'm well south of the bridge, I can see it's a lot more shallow and the lake is a lot narrower overall. Just got into the mouth of the Blood River, and it's bigger than I expected. A lot of TVA land back in here. There was plenty of wind on the Blood River, but it was extremely gusty and shifty and very difficult to read. The mouth of the Blood River was impressively broad, and the so-called river winds and twists its way back into the hills and is fed by multiple different creeks. Over 20 miles from the dock, I'd reached my destination, and Sydney would be on the way soon to pick me up. But I still had some time to kill, and I was curious about the area, so I beached the boat over in a side creek, had my lunch, and then I decided to take a walk in the woods. Most of the land surrounding the Blood River is TVA managed, and therefore open to the public. Later in the afternoon, Sydney met me at the campground next to the public boat ramp.
You ready to get some pizzas?
Yes.
Get it.
Until tomorrow, hopefully.
Bye.
Hang on now. I would return the following day with the trailer to recover the Osprey. I figured she'd make it for the night. This was my second overnighter in the O'Day Ospray. So far, all of my dinghy cruising has been very short range and limited to what I would consider my local waters. In the 15-foot wooden Sharpie I built, I've done several overnighters and even a 3-day trip on the Cumberland. In the 12-foot baby skiff I built, I've done a couple of overnighters. I enjoyed this cruise in the Osprey, and I could see how you could very easily cover some pretty significant distance if you were determined enough. Based on my experiences up until now, I would have to say I have the most fun cruising my smallest boat, the 12-foot baby skiff. Maybe that sounds ridiculous to some people, but it just seems the more you can simplify sailing and camping, the more enjoyable it is. And of course, there is also that unexplainable joy that comes from sailing a wooden boat. I still love my fiberglass O'Days that I've had, but it's just sort of a different animal, I guess. Maybe I'm a little bit weird. This channel will continue to charge along under full sail, but at cumberlandrover.com I offer videos not available on this channel or anywhere else. The videos and articles are free. I don't run ads, but I do have a store offering some unique handmade products of my own design that I think will be of interest to sailors and outdoor enthusiasts.